Today's video, we'll look into a scenario in which the top 10 nations go to war. United States, Russia, China, Korea, Britain, France, Japan, Italy, Turkey. In Europe, I can just say this right now. You're not winning. And Asia, yeah, they're in trouble. Yes, they're in big trouble. And now North and South America, you probably should run, especially you, Venezuela. You might want to exit the world. Exit the world. Pew. Okay. In Africa, they might last a bit longer. They don't like being colonized, so they might become evil. But then again, France secretly colonized all of them. And same with Russia and America and China. And I'm not going to think about what they're actually doing to make all those cell phones. Let's just not think about it. And where are we going to start? In North America. With orange. Yes, we need an orange. Yes, an orange. And I mean, does anybody really like these nations? Like, there's like not the best nations. Now, imagine living in a nation with no left-wing party. Like, what do you do if you don't want to be a right? If you don't like capitalism? Well, I mean, there's probably not many people that don't like it. Or is there? I don't know. It's probably good. With them taking over Trinidad and Tobago. Because, I mean, the U.S. Army needs a vacation. And then Canada, I'm sorry, Canada, the best nation in the world. But, yeah, you already lost 4 major cities and your capital. Well, it's probably more than that. With them then taking over another major city. And you know what gets worse? Alberta is the worst province. They decide to revolt. But we all know they're a bad province. Although they're full of oil, so that's probably the best thing. Oil is great. With them cutting off British Columbia. And maybe now, and after America takes it over, they force the pipeline. Because you know what? I don't care. You have to do what I say. And you know what's next? Yeah, Winnipeg Falls. And so is Lake Winnipeg. Like, it's literally a Great Lake, Great Lake, Great Lake. These are secretly Great Lakes, although this is shallow. And has very little water, even though it's really big. And this is probably, like, okay. Well, I can imagine Canada would probably be capitulating at this point. But with the world occupying it, yeah, at this point, it's definitely a world occupation. It's definitely the world occupying it at this point. And let's go to the Mexico front. How did they do there? With them landing in Yucatan first. Why Yucatan? Because that gives them access to cut this area off to block supplies coming north. And let me guess, they're somehow blaming this on drugs. I mean, maybe we should invade Colombia instead of Venezuela. Maybe you should invade Colombia instead of Venezuela. Probably a better one. Although nobody's going to listen to what I... But there's no world leader who's watching these videos and going to do crazy stunts based on what I say. It's not like if I say right now, Vladimir Putin, put 7 million troops on your front line. Put all of your troops on your front line with Ukraine and you'll win. It's not like he'll take that idea and be like, wow, that's a good idea. As I take Mexico City, because let's be honest, Mexico, the only thing that I keep Mexico together is its mountains. With them collapsing. Well, at this point, we'll go to the European front. In Europe, I'm sorry, but you're not getting out of this alive. With the United Kingdom taking over Ireland. Oh, great, they're colonizing again. We don't like colonialists. Although maybe we do. Colonialism wasn't the worst. I can't even say that with a straight face. So let's invade Spain. Without the S. With Britain taking over Lisbon and then moving in to take over Madrid just to spite France. With France moving their forces to connect the front. And then this is what the front becomes. With Spain being held by North Africa. Oh, great. I'm sure Spain likes that. And well, let's invade Benelux and Germany, with France quickly getting to the Rhine, with Russia invading Belarus, knowing they'll probably just let them. You might say, how are they invading it so fast? Well, if you think of it, they would have more troops in the front. And well, Turkey starts a front in the south. And let's hope they don't do what they did in Patak again. Although they probably are. Well, an invasion's made here into Georgia, which is mostly occupied. Not mostly, that's a lie. And this becomes a front. With their front in around Sumy managing to move, and Kharkiv, yeah. With their front line in Ukraine starting to move, because there's not much aid definitely coming in at this point. And then the Balkan War breaks out. Baltic War? Balkan? The difference between the Baltics are and Balkans are one likes to off each other and the others don't off each other. Probably do, but let's pretend they don't. With Italy moving into what they wanted in World War One. And then they take over Albania, how Italian. And they invade Greece. But guess what? All the Italian forces, pew, 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 pew. See how useless they are? And Turkey's like, yeah, you're stronger than me on paper, but you're weak. Like, that's pathetic, Italy. You're pathetic. And Italy gets upset. But do you think they really care? With Odessa managing to fall. With the encirclement of Switzerland. Why of Switzerland encirclement? Because it would become an encirclement. And Moldova falls. And with Turkey sending some forces to help take over the coast. Now let's move on to the North Korea front. Pew pew. Pew 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 pew. Yep, that didn't end well. Now let's move to Mongolia. I'm taking Ulaanbaatar, and with Russian forces coming in on multiple fronts, and this front being sealed away from Kazakhstan being able to access it to launch an offensive, Mongolia is pretty much forced to surrender. With them invading Nepal, 10 years later they take it over. That's a joke. With India deciding to invade Afghanistan because they managed to before, long before they were a colony, because Britain was pathetic. And Sri Lanka gets taken over. And how come their islands got stolen? Let's fix that right quick. India, yeah. With China taking over the South China Sea, because why not? And why do they claim it all? Like, what if India started claiming the Indian Ocean? Mexico, the Gulf of Mexico. Well, let's move to the middle, this part of the front, which is Central Asia. And they start with a push towards Kabul. Not Kabul. Islamabad. And their forces move into northern Pakistan's lands. From India, they start pushing rapidly. You might think that's not that impressive, but Kazakhstan starts falling. With Russia managing to move in towards capital Astana. With Astana falling and them capturing big chunks of the north. They continue their offensive, with them launching one over in this direction. Try to collapse the will of Kazakhstan. Seemingly, they get to here. With China invading Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. With them starting to advance this way towards China's forces, with China seeing this and moving their forces north towards it. With this area completely collapsing. And now let's move to the Syria-Iraq-Iran front. With them advancing rapidly in northern Syria and Iraq. So let's go to North America, where I'm sure they're having fun at this point. And with them landing in Venezuela. And they do it quite impressively. Yeah, this is lame. As they start taking more land. And then they manage to take Caraguas. Yes, definitely falling this fast. As they're invading basically Vietnam again. As they get stuck in the front line. As they start moving into Honduras. Because nobody likes Honduras. Like Panama. And they take over the Panama Canal. And they rename it the American Canal. I guess they can call the Caribbean Sea the American Sea now that they occupy it. As they land in Colombia. With them using this landing ground to connect their forces in these two fronts. As it's only American forces invading here. So let's go back to Europe. As Belarus begins to start to fall. With them using this to connect to the exclave. And while they manage to capture this, with Turkey starting to push south in Greece and start to take over some of the islands they still have it. With Switzerland somehow falling. With these forces moving up here as Kiev manages to fall. As Ukrainian forces are mostly cut off, but they're still fighting. With an advance breaking through across Germany's front line. And they push all of the way to Berlin, which they take. And they take most of the country over as they move into Denmark. As a big shift in the front line has happened. With them connecting with Russian forces. With what's left of Europe, it's in trouble. But they're not willing to surrender just yet. With the United States making a landing on 3 islands. The island of Newfoundland, the island of Greenland, and the island of Iceland. And while Canada is in trouble now, it's due to all these islands being taken over, they're having trouble. With Denmark failing to protect it. We all know Denmark is kind of pathetic. With Denmark collapsing in Greenland, because they collapsed in Europe already. With them using this to start moving into northern Canada. At this point, the world forces start withdrawing. Which leads it to mostly occupied until the full country collapses. And with this is a major shift. As let's focus there. Now in Asia, yeah. Kazakhstan begins to fall. As India manages to collapse Pakistan. And they take some of Afghanistan. With them taking over most of Central Asia. As they start moving into the Middle East. With Afghanistan just being held. With a rapid advance into Myanmar. Rapidly into Thailand, Laos, and into Cambodia. Collapsing both of the nations in the process. At this point, well, they're getting ready to go south. As they manage to take over the rest of Thailand, Myanmar, and this part of not small of Indonesia. with them landing on the island of Jakarta and taking it over, and then moving in and taking over the island of Java. And then this becomes front as they take over the Philippines. Oh, that's not great. And as America is stuck in a stalemate in South America, they decide to launch an offensive. And you may ask where? South of Buenos Aires, as they start to gain forces in southern South America. As they move up to take Buenos Aires, and then wrap around into Uruguay, taking Uruguay's capital. And with this, as forces are coming to defend it, a big breakthrough happens into Patagonia. And another breakthrough up into southern Brazil, where they get stopped. But the front looking like this, which is a two-front stuck. And them sending more forces down here, as they're having a better time. Even though it's mountains, there's not as bad of a time. And them starting to move deeper into Venezuela and start taking more of Colombia. Moving towards Bogota. They land with, oh, I just realized France is down here. With a lot of forces being landed in France. It's in French Guiana. Which allowed this. With them now moving to take Quito in Ecuador. And then to try to take Lima from Peru. With them moving north and starting to move into Paraguay. But at least they're not wiping out 75% of the population or something. Them taking these lands in southern Brazil over. With them moving in and managing to take Santiago as they move into northern Chile. With this area collapsing, Paraguay collapses. After they take Bogota, the front line collapses all the way to here. As after they get fully into Brazil out of these nations, the front stalls out again, but then they manage this front to continue it moving. But as it goes back to a stalemate before they achieve anything major there, let's go to Europe. With Russia launching an invasion here, and the United Kingdom invading over here. With America still working on South America, they're still working on Europe. And Afghanistan still being worked on. And this pocket here is being worked on. With them creating a few more pockets. With Europe mostly holding on, and they manage to move in and they take Iran. And then they take all the Caspian coast. With Turkey moving more forces into the Middle East along with Russia, they're starting to move in and move to the Sinai Peninsula all the way to the Suez, which they manage to take the coast and then take Baghdad, and then they start taking over Kuwait and parts of Arabia, and Iran is still managing to hold on, despite under a siege. With forces entering Sweden from the south, and these two areas start to collapse, then Finland ends up in trouble. Which leads to this pocket in trouble. With the pockets in this part of Europe starting to collapse. But they're starting to move forces into the Middle East to help with that front, and keep some in Spain for their next move. With them moving in and managing to take Lima. And then they move in and take La Paz and Sucre, the two cities that are major in Bolivia. I'm starting to cross the line all the way to here. and they start moving south. The managing takes cities like Sao Paulo, Curitiba, and move towards Rio. And they move in to take Brasilia, which has a really nice city layout. And then they move up to take Rio. And then they move in like this, with the world forces withdrawing from here, so then they surrender. With American forces landing in Nigeria. With them making major gains. And a few land in New Zealand. As they take over these islands, while Borneo, Brunei, and Indonesia lose control over this island, and Malaysia has fallen. And what's the name of this island? And then they move into the Papua New Guinea Islands, with the Oceania front collapsing. Just Australia left, which some people think is the whole thing crazy. With them moving into the south, taking cities like Sydney, Canberra, Melbourne, and stuff. And then they move this way to take cities like Perth. With this being the American occupied areas. And then the Asian forces land here. Here and here, with China's forces rapidly advancing into Queensland and Northern Territory. Why is that even a territory thing? With the west coast, east coast falling. Now to invade Western Australia. With them ending up having to go into the center, and when they end up this way, they're ending up fighting with the emu, so this might not go well. As it does finally collapse. As this pocket collapses, followed by the Ukrainian pocket collapsing, followed by the Afghanistan pocket collapsing, and the Iran pocket collapsing. With American forces landing in southern South Africa. And they managed to make actual gains. With Saudi Arabia being the focus of a few of the nations. With France and Italy deciding to go on a colonial spree. And they start going across the lands. And they take more, and finally this front actually collapses. With Egypt, Algeria, Morocco, South Africa, Nigeria, Ethiopia slowing down the advances. But Sudan is glad when they move in, as this liberates them from the evil forces. With the American advance in North Africa speeding up now. In West Africa, I mean. As they move over and take these lands. And well, they do this. And in their southern front, they start doing really well. With India managing to take over Madagascar. With the evil forces, I guess, being the aggressors. With them managing to move up to take lands in Congo. As this war basically just fuels these 10 nations' economies. With the forces moving through to connect in this area and connecting over here, south of the Sahara, with them starting to get close to making another pocket. Which realistically, once 2 are made, it becomes 3 pockets, as none of them are connected. As 3 pockets are created, the forces start losing control of more lands. And eventually they lose control of all of these lands. and the Sahara Desert starts collapsing the bigger nations, with these nations falling. And with Ethiopia, Kenya, and Tanzania being the ones holding this, when Ethiopia starts to fall, all of these lands fall. With that falling, and Kenya starting to get invaded, the front starts moving in the south. With Tanzania being in trouble now. But they manage to be the last stand. With Tanzania becoming the last stand. As Tanzania fights till the end, hoping these forces collapse. But they don't. Well, that's how the top 10 nations took over the world. And well, that's pretty much all for today's video. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Wild Mapper out, and non-delay subscribe. Bye, guys!